30 seconds.
Oh, we did headphones? Yeah.
Katie, Liz, Nevin, we're excited that you're here.
Now,
Good evening. I want to call this meeting of the Durham City Council to order at 7 p.m. on Monday, December the 7th. And I certainly want to welcome everyone here today, all of my colleagues, all of our wonderful staff, and all the people who are watching us at home and in various media. We're really glad to have you with us tonight. As we gather tonight to do our business together, it's a good time to remember that we still have many people in our community who are suffering from COVID-19, from gun violence in our community, and we remember all of them and think of them. And I will ask you, as we do, to please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. Councilmember Reese, will you please lead us in the pledge to the flag?
Well, Mr. Mayor, good evening to you. Good evening, colleagues, city staff, and the folks watching at home. When I say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Reese. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Schul,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson,
Here.
Councilmember Caballero,
Here.
Councilmember Freelon,
Here.
Councilmember Freeman,
present.
Councilmember Middleton,
Here.
Councilmember Reese.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Colleagues, it's now time for announcements by the council. And before we get started on those, I want to make two short comments. One is, tonight we're going to start a new custom, which is after every 2 hours, or roughly, we're going to take a 5-minute break to give our closed captioners a break. It's really hard to be a closed captioner, and the work that they do is very demanding. And we've had some long meetings lately, and they asked if we could give a 5-minute break to our closed captioners after roughly every 2 hours. And so hopefully tonight's meeting won't go 2 hours. But if it does, we'll take a break. And I will ask you all to please remind me if I don't remember that. But I want to thank our closed captioners for the work that they do and express my gratitude. And then the second thing I want to do is just say to two of our close family here at the Durham City Council, Councilmember Freeman and Beverly Thompson, both had difficult losses in their families in the past couple of weeks. And I want to acknowledge that, and I want to tell you all that our hearts go out to you both, and that we're really glad that you're both back with us tonight. And we think of you and we send you all of our warmth and all of our best wishes and prayers, and we're so glad to see you both. All right, colleagues, announcements by members of the council. Councilmember Caballero.
I just also wanted to congratulate Councilmember Freeman for finishing her master's in public administration at the great institution of NC Central. That's right. So that's a big achievement, and lots of congrats on that.
Hear, hear. Okay, other announcements, Councilmember Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Excuse me. Mr. Mayor, today was an historic day here in Durham, and I just didn't want to let the moment pass without congratulating the Durham County Board of Commissioners who were sworn in for a 4-year term, all 5 of them today. They all run at the same time, which I think is an interesting idea. I often wonder what it would be like for all of us to run at the same time. Probably best that we don't. In any event, there were a number of historic firsts with those swearings in. First and foremost, all of the new commissioners are women, which is fantastic. And our friend and colleague, now County Commissioner Nida Alam, was sworn in today as the first Muslim woman to hold public office in North Carolina. And she's just a fantastic public servant, a dear friend, and really excited about that. And mostly what I wanted to do was congratulate the new chair of the Durham County Board of Commissioners, Brenda Howerton, who is one of the folks in our community that I know a lot of people have known for many years and understand her character and what she's about. And she is someone I'm proud to call a friend. And I'm really looking forward to what the County Commission will be able to accomplish for our community under her leadership. So just wanted to make the folks at home aware of what an amazing day it was in Durham. Also to congratulate the other folks who were sworn in today, Heidi Carter, Wendy Jacobs, who was elected vice chair of the County Commission, and the other rookie on that board, Commissioner Burns. We expect great things from all of them as they expect great things from us. And it's just another great chapter in the partnership between the city and the county. And I look forward to working with all 5 of them. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Council Member. More thumbs up and applause. Any more announcements? I think Councilmember Freeman has her hand up. Councilmember Freeman.
Yes, thank you. I thank my colleagues for their condolences and congratulatory text messages, calls, and all of the above. I really appreciate the outpouring of support for the community. I just wanted to say thank you and to acknowledge that doing this work, it can be, overwhelming. And I think in the same way, it's like having kids, in both directions, it's all the work and all the rewards at the same time. And I just really appreciate having this opportunity to serve in the city with this board and this community. I didn't know what I had, and I just saw the character of those around me rise and continue to rise. And I just really appreciate all of you. And then just in addition, just noting, I do want to congratulate our new county commissioners, Burns and Alam, and acknowledging that this is the first full woman board is phenomenal. And I will say that the future is woman, and we'll bring that on conversation on later. But I wanted to also take a moment and just say happy holidays, and acknowledging that we're in the holiday season, and that Thursday will be Hanukkah, I believe the start of Hanukkah, and I just want to wish folks a happy Hanukkah as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's almost time to make the latkes.
Yeah.
Any further announcements? All right, I don't think I see any. Councilmember Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening. Good evening to all of you colleagues and everyone watching. Mr. Mayor, thank you for acknowledging the tough season that some of our family members have had in Beverly, and Councilor Freeman, and I want to add my condolences to them. I want to thank Councilor Caballero as well for shouting out Councilor Freeman's accomplishment. I had a note here to shout her out, so let me add my words of congratulations to her as well. The future is not women, life is women. The past, present, and future have always been women. So we thank God for that. And I want to acknowledge a historic day. About 80 years ago, an American president called this a day that would live in infamy because of what happened at Pearl Harbor. But who am I to argue for the American president? But I think this was a great day today, particularly here in Durham, and let nothing detract or eclipse the greatness of this day in the moment. We'll have plenty of time to talk about a whole lot of stuff, but today I just want us to bask in the greatness, the accomplishment of this day. I think it's altogether fitting and appropriate that Durham County would have an all-woman board. What other county in America? So I think it's fully appropriate and fitting, and I want to congratulate all of those brilliant county commissioners, all leaders in their own right, for their accomplishment, and I look forward to great things for our county. And I also want to thank you, Mr. Mayor, for pointing out the challenges that many of our people are struggling with. Since our last meeting, we know that gunfire has continued in our city. I was hoping that with the approach of the holiday season and the weather changing, getting colder, that there would be an abatement, but it seems to continue. I personally have had to sit and comfort parishioners from my church who live in some of our public housing complexes because of gunfire. But on yesterday, one of the parishioners of my church had gunfire erupt feet from her home in the Brightleaf community. This ain't the projects. It's an affluent community where this occurred. And I just want to say that I think this is an ominous reminder, a message to all of us, or a reminder, I should say, of something we already knew, that if you live in this city, it is clear that there is no zip code, there is no degree of foliage-induced cloistering effect that will protect you from this issue of gunfire. I believe that if we don't get a handle on this issue, it will eclipse the prevailing narrative of Durham as a city that is emergent and descendant. So I just want to again stress to my government, my elected officials, and to myself as part of that government, that I believe that we should be treating this like we're treating COVID, and place our city on at least de facto, not declare, we don't have to declare, but de facto emergency footing when it comes to this issue. I do want to say, in terms of folk who keep writing us and asking us what our response should be, that there are a number of things in the hopper, there are a number of things in the pipeline that we've articulated as a city that I think that we should make sure that we keep giving voice to and reminding folk that we need to be deliberate about bringing them forward. We heard a few weeks ago a report about expanding Little City United, the Violence Interrupter Initiative. That is in the pipeline. I hope that we are still being deliberate about fast tracking that. We heard a proposal that's aimed at root causes at our last work session. So that's in the pipeline. We know that police on any given day are going to do what the police do. Police will investigate crime and try and make arrests. Whether violence is up or down, that's what the police do. So whatever the default setting the police are on when they do what they do, I think that's kind of a standard. That may be a baseline of what we do, but I think the question is, what more can we do as a city? I was pleased by the chief's report when last he was before us about centralizing command and centralizing some functions about dealing with gun violence. But these things that are in the hopper, that are in the pipeline, the people of the city are wondering what the state of them is, what the state of those things are, and what we're doing. I just want to kind of tick those things off and remind folk that they are in the pipeline and that we need to be working on them. Our violent crime task force, or I should say wellness, public safety and wellness task force is in the pipeline as well. And hopefully they'll be meeting soon. I do, though, for the sake of historical integrity and accuracy, want to just remind folk that the initial iteration of our wellness task force had nothing to do with violent crime. It was part of a larger project and agenda towards rethinking the way we police ourselves. And it was a companion recommendation to not hiring more police. It had more to do with state violence that police might perpetrate against folk that they encounter, more so than the gun violence we're seeing in the city now. Be that as it may, if we're going to now proffer that as part of our suite of responses to violent crime, then I hope that we will be deliberate and bring it forward with deliberate speed, if that's going to in fact be part of our response to current violent crime. We have an offer still on the table from ShotSpotter for a free trial that we remanded back, if I can use that word, back to the administration. I don't know if they're bundling that with the NCCU recommendations, but that is something we said, well, if a recommendation comes forth from the staff, we would look at it. and one has not come forward yet, but I do intend, I think we need to have an up or down vote on that proposal. I think the people of the city deserve to hear us respond to that offer that was made to us. So I don't know when the staff is bringing that forward, but if they do not, I think that this is an issue on which I don't need the staff to make recommendations to me, to do whatever we need to do to save our lives. I think that's something that we should vote on. So I will, if the staff doesn't bring that forward, call for a vote on it, up or down, whatever it is. So those things that I've ticked off, I guess, and I hope I haven't missed anything, basically now represent the lion's share, if not all, of what we are looking at over and above what we normally do from a policing response to address the issue of gun violence in our city. My sense is that the most amount of, we've coalesced pretty much around violence interrupter and expanding Bull City United. I hope that we will be moving quickly on that, on par with our moving with COVID as we deal with COVID and any other emergency that affects the quality of life of our city. We're through the looking glass on this. This is a right now issue. I want to, again, as I close, state that I will support just about any initiative, root cause, and tactical short-term initiatives as well, because the problem is just that serious. While we wait on the vaccine of root causes, if I might borrow that language, we also need to be talking about what does our mask look like? What are the short-term things we can do right now as a city to deal with this issue? I believe the time is now, and we're the people in the seat. So it falls to us to address it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. God bless everybody. Happy holiday season to everyone. And I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Council Member. Are there any further announcements? Okay, we'll now move then to priority items by the City Manager. Madam Manager, welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, and members of the Durham City Council. I do have 2 priority items for your consideration this evening. Agenda item number 8, 2021 long session legislative agenda. Attachments number 5 through number 7 have been added. Agenda item number 24, the Unified Development Ordinance Text Amendment, Omnibus Changes 15, TC2 0000002. Pursuant to Council's request, additional information has been provided in attachment number 5. That is all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Manager. Madam Attorney, any priority items tonight?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, members of City Council. It's good to see you all this evening. The City Attorney's Office has no priority items.
Thank you, Madam Attorney.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, any priority items tonight?
Greetings, Mr. Mayor and Madam Mayor Pro Tem and council members. I have 2 priority items. Both of them were disposed of at the last work session. The Durham Affordable Housing Implementation Committee appointment was referred back to the City Clerk's office at November 19th work session, and the We Are the Ones COVID-19 response, a discussion occurred at the work session. And those are my priority items. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. All right, colleagues, we'll now move to our consent agenda. The consent agenda consists of items that the council has previously worked on, and it can be approved by a single vote of the council. Members of the public or council members are able to pull items from the consent agenda, and if so, then they will be considered at the end of the meeting. I'll now read the consent agenda. Item 1, approval of City Council minutes. Item 3, Durham Housing Authority Board of Commissioners appointment. Item 4, Durham Planning Commission appointment. Item 5, FY21-22 Budget Development Schedule. Item 7, Revised Safety and Wellness Task Force Bylaws. Item 9, October 2020 Bid Report. Item 10, Condemnation Action for Replacement of the Stagecoach Road Lift Station. Item 11, Proposed Lease Agreement with Kids Properties LLC for the Police Department Motor Vehicle Impound Storage Facility. Item 12, Agreement for North Carolina Central University Police Department Extended Jurisdiction. Item 13, Contract ST306 Road Rebuilding 2020. Item 14, contract ST311 street repairs and repaving project 2021. Item 15, contract SW76 sidewalk repairs 2020. Item 16, contract SW78 street maintenance concrete repair 2020. Item 17, contract SW78C, request for qualifications for inspection services for various city construction projects. Item 18, Lakewood Avenue Sewer and NC 54 Waterline Replacement Project, city contracts number 16892-amendment number 1. Item 27, program year 2020 amendment to Workforce Innovation and Opportunity WIOA Act contract with Eckerd Youth Alternatives, Inc. You have now heard the consent agenda, and I will accept a motion now for its approval.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Reese, seconded by Councilmember Freeman. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Schewel,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Caballero,
Aye.
Councilmember Freelon,
Aye.
Councilmember Freeman,
Aye.
Councilmember Middleton,
I vote aye.
Councilmember Reese.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. The ayes have it, and the motion passes unanimously. We'll now move to our general business agenda. Item 8, 2021 long session legislative agenda. And I believe that Ms. Wallace is here with us.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Carmisha Wallace, City Attorney's Office. And I have on the agenda tonight the proposed legislative agenda, which includes some advocacy items for the 2021 long session. For the viewing public, I'd like for people to know that the legislative subcommittee has met twice to discuss the proposed legislative agenda. And as of the last meeting of the legislative subcommittee, we had, I think, 2 items that we had not made, the council has not made a decision as to whether to include those items on the legislative agenda. Those 2 items are the items pertaining to potential local legislation pertaining to the city of Durham. And unfortunately, I think Councilmember Reese, you were not able to join us for the city council work session as certainly the chair of the legislative subcommittee. So I will certainly defer to you if you have anything else to add to that.
I was able to, thanks to the miracle of modern technology, I was able to incorporate all of the things that were said and done into my brain. Really enjoyed the conversation, and I don't have anything else to add to it at this time. Carmisha, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wallace. Colleagues, I think that we have unanimity on the agenda except for the 2 items that we had asked our staff to do some research on, but I'm going to ask Ms. Wallace and Councilmember Reese if they would agree with that.
Yes.
Yes.
That's my
okay.
understanding, Mr. Mayor.
All right. So colleagues, we have 2 items that we had asked for research on. One of them is the charter provision on council vacancies. And the second was the, what's the second item? Remind me what that is again.
The second item,
Ms. Wallace, what was the second item? Remind me again.
for that second item is about the local charter amendment for flexibility for providing grants.
Oh, that's right. Thank you. All right. Colleagues, I'm going to ask Councilmember Reese, would you like to offer anything on these as the chair of our committee, get us started on this discussion and perhaps provide some perspective on these and your thoughts about the staff's recommendations or the staff's research?
Sure. First of all, I want to thank our staff for putting together the information that we got on that. Our city attorney's office and Ms. Wallace have done a fantastic job in teeing us up to have this conversation. I I look forward to hearing what other folks have to say about these. I've had in the past, I've talked about my concerns about moving forward to the legislature with the proposed charter amendments, but I look forward to hearing what other folks have to say about it. And that's all I really wanted to add right now, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Colleagues, any other comments, general comments before we can take these issues up one by one? All righty. Why don't we start then with the,
Mr. Mayor, I was trying to seek recognition.
I'm sorry, go ahead, council member.
That's okay, thank you. And I'm pleased to serve as vice chair of the committee. I was present at the discussion at the last work session. The two issues, matters that we're considering are two that I had raised. And I just want to reiterate that I raised them because as I look at the agenda, the things that we're proposing to take to the legislature, all of them, I think, align with our values as a city, and I certainly support all of them. The interesting thing is that, when I talk to residents of the city, it's very rare that any of those things that are on our legislative menu, if you will, come up from constituents, either an email or regular conversation. The two things that I did, however, recommend do actually come up or did come up. And one, that's our ability to have agility to help small businesses and people in our community through grants. And I want to thank the staff for the incredible amount of research they did and due diligence they did. I don't think that's a really controversial ask to see if we can have more agility like a sister city to help people that are struggling. The other issue was surrounding our agility, not to take away from our menu of options when it comes to filling a seat, but to add to them, not to do any violence to our ability to engage in the selection process. But COVID taught us some things. I think that this pandemic put us in a situation where, because we could not engage in the type of outreach and have the type of in-person community input, particularly for those that are technologically challenged, that we could not have that during this selection process. I think it would behoove us to have as many tools in our toolbox to protect our democracy and expand our democracy. So I think I'm not calling for any violence or destruction of the selection process, but an augmentation to it. And that would allow us to have an election to fill a vacant seat without any fear of retribution or censure or sanction from the state legislature. A number of folks, we got letters from the People's Alliance, from the Durham Community Affairs of Black People, and just regular citizens who wanted the opportunity, particularly given what the challenges the pandemic presented, to fill the seats that ultimately the people of this city own. Every one of us sits in a seat that is owned by the people of the city. So having a situation where they could assert their ownership rights during an election, if we cannot do a selection process successfully, I think to me is just as natural as breathing. That seems to me to be a very organic ask of our legislature. I'm not really fearful. I mean, this is Durham. When have we ever been afraid to ask the legislature anything? And we certainly don't have to lift up our heads or raise our voices to get the attention of our legislature as a city. I mean, you can go down the list of any number of things we've asked that I think could awaken some concern, of a legislator if they were so inclined. So I think that, of all the things we're asking, these are the two I actually heard from people about. And insofar as, we're reflecting the desire and will of the people of this city, I would support their being placed on the agenda. I don't find them controversial at all. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, council member. Do you also want to address the other change regarding the grants?
Oh, absolutely. I thought I did. I think, COVID taught us that, to a person on this government, we want to be as responsive as possible to the needs of our people. I think to a person, we had expressed a desire to do grants more so than loans if we could. I think this tweak to our charter, if it can come to pass, would give us that agility to do just what all of us said we want to do. And certainly when we heard from our small business community, there was a desire for us to, if we could, to do more grants than loans. And we wound up doing a hybrid. Of course, we're always going to have a Durham workaround. But if Raleigh found a way to do grants without sanction and without fear of any reprisal, then I'd like to have that agility as a city as well. I mean, why wouldn't we want to have that? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, council member. All right, colleagues, why don't we start with the council vacancy question. You have heard Councilmember Middleton. Are there other thoughts that people want to offer on this? The idea would be to provide the option for the council to either choose to appoint or to have an election. And you see there's some suggested languages, a potential charter change in our packet. Any comments, colleagues? Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't object to the substance of either of those requests. I do, however, share Councilmember Reese's concerns about the current composition of our state legislature and calling any attention by them to their ability to modify our charter. I trust our delegation to advance the things that they think would most benefit Durham. And I remember hearing talking about at the meeting, having a conversation with the delegation about that as well. I'm wondering if anyone was able to reach out to any of our delegation members about their thoughts.
I didn't, except that I did talk to, about that specific thing, but I did talk to the head of our delegation, the senior member, Senator Woodard, about in general, that we were going to be bringing, he knows that we're bringing these things. He actually has listened in to some of our meetings regarding the agenda, and he's started to have actually some staff at the General Assembly, maybe his assistant, I'm not sure, look into some of these as well already. So he's very aware of the fact that we're going to be asking for their guidance on what we think is movable or not movable.
Great. Yeah, I mean, I don't know then whether those things being in our agenda or not, like what the relevance of that is in terms of what we're asking them for, because we're really asking them for advice on all of the items that we're putting in the agenda in terms of whether they think they're movable or not. So anyway, I'm interested in other people's thoughts on whether that should be a formal part of the agenda, or if we should have if we should say, hey, we'd like you to look into this and give us a recommendation on whether or not you think it's a good idea as a separate question from our legislative agenda.
So my one thing I'll say about this is that, just to remind everybody, we made this agenda before November the 4th. And we did so not knowing what the potential makeup of the legislature would be. And we knew that ahead of time, that we wouldn't know. And so we made an agenda of things that we were excited about. And so I think, my sense is that if we want to put this on the agenda, if this is something we're in favor of, we should do so, and then seek their advice once we get to that meeting. And I know they'll be candid with us and will help us figure it out.
Great.
Other comments, colleagues?
Just want to make sure advancing it through the agenda doesn't then mean that it goes past our delegation.
Right. Everything that we put on this agenda will be something that we discuss with our delegation at the upcoming meeting.
Great. I'm comfortable with it then.
Other comments, colleagues? Councilmember Caballero?
I just want to say I'm fine with it moving forward because there's going to be an opportunity to get feedback from our delegation, and it's not done here, so.
All right, thank you. Any other comments, colleagues? Okay, then let's move, Councilmember Middleton, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to thank my colleagues. I think, all of it's going to be, everything we put on is going to be vetted by our delegation. I do want to, if the next time if our legislature passes another crazy bathroom bill or something, and we're afraid of arousing their ire, we may not want to do any more statements of resolution or support on controversial things if we're concerned about inviting scrutiny from them or action against us. We might not do any more amicus briefs on any controversial subject because they'll look at who supported, who submitted supporting briefs in May. I mean, this is Durham. I mean, we know that we're on their list. And our charter, we're a creature of the state. By definition, our charter is a creature of the state. They don't need to be prompted to do anything if they want to do something to Durham's charter. So I just want to say for the record, I think it was Councilor Freelon who a couple of meetings ago admonished us and reminded us of the fighting spirit of Durham and how we got to go in there and shake things up in the legislature. I'm pretty sure it was Councilor Freelon. So I just want to echo that sentiment that we issue statements all the time as a council that sticks our finger in the eye of not just the local legislature, but the federal government. So I certainly am comfortable with the sensibility of these particular recommendations, and it's what people asked for in Durham. So I'm let the chips fall where they may, but I have no fear. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Council Member. Other comments on this one? All right, let's move now to the issue of the grants. And I know our city attorney is with us. And Madam Attorney, you all have done some research on the grants. I think it might be useful if you would address that with us.
Sure, Mr. Mayor. And actually, Senior Assistant City Attorney Krista Kukuro is with us this evening, and Krista has done the lion's share of the research on that issue. So I'd like to turn it over to her if that's acceptable.
That would be great. Ms. Kukuro, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council. Glad to be back here discussing this with you all. You should have received the memo in the packet. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to review it. I think I gave a brief summary of it at work session recently, and I'll just run through quickly the highlights. I think a lot of what prompted this conversation was a charter provision in Raleigh, upon which they base their grant program for COVID relief, as Councilmember Middleton was referring to earlier. And so what I did is researched other cities and towns' charter provisions across the state. Didn't do nearly as many as with the election, but I looked at about 15 of the cities in our area and then big cities outside of our area. And I did not find charter authority similar to Raleigh, or really any charter authority that might give the authority to give grants. And so Durham does actually have some language that allows us to give a contribution to charitable organizations. It doesn't elaborate on what that means. And in the memo, I've described that we could probably follow the IRS's definition on that. But again, there's some vagueness there that doesn't give us the clarity that we're probably looking for in this. And so additionally in the memo, what I talk about is the constitutional considerations. So when we're talking about giving grants, we have to consider our local authority that's given through the charter, and then also authority that's given through state statutes by the General Assembly and the Constitution, of course. And that's where we run into a little bit of a problem, and problem might be dramatic, but that's, I think, the biggest hurdle in any of these programs, grant programs that we might be talking about. When we're talking about this constitutional consideration, really what we're talking about is the exclusive emoluments clause of the Constitution and the public purpose clause. And there's been a lot of research that the School of Government has done on this, but I think ultimately when we're talking about giving money to entities, we have to make sure that it's fulfilling a public purpose. Otherwise, that public money could be construed as a gift. It's not being used for the public's benefit. And unfortunately, when we're talking about grant programs, there's no clear line. When is it a gift? What is public purpose? And so we really have to consider case by case when we're talking about developing these programs. And that's what we had to do earlier this year when the city was developing its COVID relief program. So in terms of what we might be able to do, we know that Raleigh relied on its charter language its charter language really has a community development focus. So that could work in some context. It's not a surefire, kind of airtight language that we might be able to use, but we can, our office can work with council and the delegation to come up with some language that might be similar to Raleigh's. But again, I think the biggest takeaway that I want to offer is that we have to consider the Constitution in any of these programs that we might be developing in the future. And a charter provision, charter change may not be enough to get us over those constitutional hurdles.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kukrow, and thank you so much for all the work you did on both of these. I think you looked at something like 50 cities for the is my memory correct on that I believe the memo says 50 cities for the charter provisions. Thank you very much for that. And for these excellent memos. All right, colleagues, discussion of this item. Councilmember Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councilor Kukrow, for just the incredible work and the primers that were provided and all the information. I'm really impressed with the work product that you produced. So let me thank you. Just a couple of questions. So is it a fair and accurate characterization that Raleigh's language is unique amongst all other cities that you looked at? There's just something germane to Raleigh's charter?
I think that's an accurate characterization of Raleigh's language. I didn't find anything as substantial or similar to Raleigh's language.
Right. And your admonitions to us about, or caution to us about constitutional hurdles and the things we have to check off moving forward, those things apply to Raleigh as well. When they, or is there something about their language that exempted them from those considerations? I mean, Raleigh has to consider those things as well, correct?
That is correct.
And to your knowledge, has Raleigh been subjected to any type of censure or sanction or challenge to their action?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. All right, I'll yield back. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's all I have for right now.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to thank the City Attorney's Office and Ms. Kukrow especially for all the work that they did getting us to this point. Also appreciate the spirit that animates this proposal. It really is, I think, about giving us as much flexibility under our charter as we can possibly have. I totally get that. I think the other thing it's important to remember about both of these proposals is what, Mr. Mayor, you were saying earlier, and that is in just 2 days, we're going to sit down, 2 days, Wednesday, we're going to sit down with our legislative delegation and hash this out. And so this document will reflect kind of our thinking, but the result of that meeting will determine what actually gets put forward from a legislative perspective by our delegation. And so I think it's really important to think of this more as a process. And on that basis, though I do have some question about whether or not this would actually do anything to let us do more stuff. If it doesn't, then it's harmless. And if it does, it helps someone. So I don't have any problem moving this forward. It's fine. I think, so that's my perspective on it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember. Any further comments? Colleagues, I think that we have a consensus on the two items, but I think we ought to go ahead and vote on our agenda as a whole. I'll accept a motion now that we accept this agenda with these two items. Is there such a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I believe Councilmember Freeman was trying to be
I'm sorry, Councilmember Freeman, I'm sorry, apologize, go ahead.
No problem, thank you. I actually just wanted to address a formality in the document itself before we move forward with the vote. Just noting on page 3, there were some notes specific to staff that were included, and I just wanted to make sure that they were removed. It's not germane to the agenda, the legislative agenda itself. And I did note specifically for Ms. Wallace The two items are on the bottom of page, I'm not, at the top of page 3 in item 16, and just noting that Asheville and Evanston should be removed. And the reference to Representative Price and Representative Butterfield.
Yes, I made those changes after you and I discussed it on Friday, and so the delegation will get the final version of the document.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember, and Ms. Wallace. Colleagues, can I have a motion on this agenda?
I'll restate prior motion.
Sorry.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Middleton, seconded, I believe, by Councilmember Reese. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Schul,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Caballero,
Aye.
Councilmember Freelon,
Aye.
Councilmember Freeman,
Aye.
Councilmember Middleton,
I vote aye.
Councilmember Reese.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The motion passes 7-0. All right, we will now move to, if I can get myself together here. We will now move to our general business agenda public hearings. And the first is item 22, the landscape manual for Durham revisions. And we will first hear from our staff.
Good evening, Mayor Schul, Mayor Pro Tem Johnson, and members of the Durham City Council. I'm Danny Coulter, Senior Planner representing the Planning Department. What's presented tonight are the revisions to the Durham Landscape Manual. Last year, members of the department were tasked with updating the manual since its initial adoption in 2005 and last revisions in April of 2013. Through the efforts from members of the Planning Department, the Department of General Services, Landscaping and Urban Forestry Division, and the partnerships with various members of the Durham Environmental Coalition, we are hopeful that you'll support these changes and adopt this document. Through the course of the revision process, there were 4 areas that we felt needed to be addressed to bring the manual up to the current industry standards. 1 were text revisions, 2 UDO amendments and new planting installation certifications, 3 plant chart revisions, 4 revised planting details and examples, and 5 was future updates. For the text revisions, the text in the manual was evaluated and updated to reflect the current best industry practices. We removed recommended practices and revised the manual to only reflect required practices and techniques. We did add, however, some eco-friendly tips to promote ecologically sound installation and maintenance practices in addition to the water-wise and water conservation tips that currently reside in the manual. Regarding UDO amendments and new planting installation certifications, through dialogue with our environmental coalition partners, there was a push to utilize more native species in Durham, which promote better wildlife habitat and ecosystems versus using non-native vegetation. We recognize that the landscape manual would not be the best tool to ensure these practices were met. Therefore, we made recommendations for some UDO text amendments made, such as utilizing all native species and tree replacement and repairing buffer revegetation and mitigation areas. Also, we made recommendations for text amendment to require that a licensed landscape architect or licensed landscape contractor certify that the correct planting practices in the manual have been utilized, which will help ensure that the livability of plant materials. These amendments should be coming to the governing bodies in the near future. For revisions to the plant tables, we reorganized all current plant tables and condensed from 8 large tables consisting of 248 pages down to 4 tables consisting of approximately 142 pages, adjusting the graphics for better legibility in order to provide the user with a more efficient process for plant selection. The way this was accomplished was to group all native and non-native species together, adding key symbols for identification, removing the individual named cultivars, removing ambiguous designations, and streamlining the water-wise planting conditions and cultural notes information. Invasive species list was also updated. We reviewed current allowed vegetation against local and national plant data, and as a result, we expanded the prohibited plant list in the manual based on recommendations from urban forestry staff, the Durham Environmental Coalition, and NC State University resources. For the planning details and example graphics, the manual contained poor quality graphics, details, and illegible text, and the goal was to update those with clean and more legible details that meet the current best industry practice and standards. Based on dialogue with our environmental partners for future updates, the planning staff is committed to revisiting potential landscape manual updates on a 5-year cycle now, which is much more frequent than has been performed in the past. This will ensure that any invasive species that move from a potential watch list to an actual invasive list can be placed on Durham's prohibited list within the manual. And as in landscape industry practices and standards change, we can update the manual accordingly to remain current. And thank you very much, and staff's available for any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Coltra. Colleagues, you have heard the report from staff, and I'm going to now declare this public hearing open. I'm going to first ask if there are any comments or questions from members of the staff. All right. Seeing none, then, I'm going to turn to the folks who have signed up to speak on this item. And I see prior to the meeting, there were 6 people who had signed up to speak on this item. And I'm going to give each of the speakers 3 minutes. They are, and I'll read them in order, Ricky White, Katie Rose Levin, Ann Roy, Marie Hill Faison, Cynthia Kolstadt, and Janet Grubber. There may be others who would like to speak on this item as well, who are here in attendance. And if you are a person who would like to speak on this item but has not signed up to do so, we're happy to have you speak. Please just raise your virtual hand or put your information in the chat. But I'm going to first start with those speakers, and I'm going to begin with Ricky White. Madam Clerk, can you please make Mr. White available to be heard?
I think I can be heard now.
Good afternoon, Mr. White, and you have 3 minutes. We're glad to have you.
Great. It's really good to be here. I'll try to keep this short. I am here representing the Elbe Creek Watershed Association. I'm the executive director of that group. First of all, I wanted to really commend the process that went into both this particular issue that y'all are voting on and the next one in terms of the text amendments. The staff were very open to a process that included both the environmental community and the development community. And I feel like we all came together, didn't get exactly what we wanted, but I feel like we're kind of headed in the right direction with these changes and with the landscape manual revisions in particular. So I'm just here to support that work. I think it was the work of a lot of folks that volunteered to make the community better through ensuring that we have better standards for plant species. And even if you're not an environmental advocate, I think it's important to know that these invasive species don't just gum up the works in our natural areas, but they go onto your neighbor's land and they create problems from a landscaping perspective. Not everybody wants English ivy in their yard. And so I think it's just a really good policy, a really good way of doing things. And I'm happy that the staff is proposing it, and I hope y'all support it.
Thank you very much, Mr. White. Now we'll hear from Katie Rose Levin. Ms. Levin, welcome, and you also have 3 minutes.
Thank you, City Council. I don't know if you can see me. So I just wanted to once again echo what Ricky said about the staff's willingness to meet with various members from the community as well as organizations. I really do want to lift up some of the folks. The Durham Environmental Coalition is not an official group, it's just a loose group. So the people who participate in this are the New Hope Audubon Society, Trees Durham, the North Carolina Invasive Plant Species Council, and others. I can't remember them all. This is the way it should work. And the thing about invasive species is that they can be a public health concern. So a lot of these issues that we're working with really do have to come back to the quality of life for Durhamites. So just encourage you to vote pro for the landscape manual updates and look forward to talking a little bit more about the text amendments later. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Levin. Now we'll hear from Ann Roy. Ms. Roy, are you available to be heard?
Yes.
Welcome, and you also have 3 minutes.
Hi, thank you. Thanks, City Council. I'm just here to support the updated manual as well. I appreciate everybody's support on it and the work they've done. And I hope that we can vote it through. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Roy. Next, we have Marie Hill Faison. Ms. Hill Faison, are you here with us? Ms. Hill Faison, are you with us tonight? Madam Clerk, do you see Ms. Hill Faison amongst the attendees?
Mr. Mayor, I don't see Ms. Hill Faison.
All right. All right, thank you very much. Then we will move on to Cynthia Kolstad. I see Ms. Kolstad also put in the text that she sent an email of support and doesn't feel the need to speak. All right, thank you to Ms. Kolstad, who we know over many years has done a lot of work on the ground, literally on the ground in this area, and knows this as well as any of us, I think. And want to express my appreciation to Ms. Kolstad for that over many, many years. And finally, we have Janet Grubber. Madam Clerk, could you make Ms. Grubber available to be heard?
I think can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Welcome, and you have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. I would just like to echo the comments that came before me, and I'm a member of Trees Durham. So, and honestly, I signed up in error because I thought I was registering just to attend the meeting, not to talk. So anyway, I won't be talking much longer than this, but other than to say thank you, City Council, and for being responsive to emails that Trees Durham has sent. And also, again, thank you to all the people who did the hard work of editing the manual, and we will appreciate a vote, hopefully, in favor of the changes proposed in the manual. Thank you.
Ms. Grubber, thank you. We're glad to have you here by mistake or on purpose.
Thanks.
How many times? And I see Ms. Carsonson also said she did not need to speak, but we're glad to see you here representing the Headwaters Group of the Sierra Club. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on item 22? All right, I don't see anyone. And so now I'm going to ask my colleagues if there are any comments that you might have or questions for staff. Madam Mayor Pro Tem, and then Councilmember Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to appreciate the work of our staff and all of the community members who have participated in putting together this document. It's just an incredibly comprehensive report. Reading through it, I learned a lot about landscaping and invasive species. And I do have some ivy in my backyard that I wish a former resident hadn't planted. So I just wanted to appreciate everyone's efforts, and also the work of the JCCPC, which I know has been pushing a lot of these different kinds of issues for a while from the elected side. I think that it's great when everybody comes together and makes something really positive happen for the community. So just wanted to express thanks to everyone who participated in putting this together. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. Councilmember Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to echo the Mayor Pro Tem's words. Just an incredible piece of work on the part of the staff. This has come before me a couple of times before Mayor Pro Tem left the JCCBC, Joint City County Planning Commission, and I know Councilor Reese as well. I have become such a much more interesting person because all the stuff I've learned about landscaping with this matter. So I just want to thank the staff, an incredible piece of work. I look forward to passing the revisions. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember, I'll just say that you were already fascinating. If you've gotten more interesting, man, unbelievable.
The jacket.
It's a jacket. All right, Councilmember Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to echo what everyone said. This is a great example of kind of inside-outside advocacy and what it can do and what it can deliver for the people of this city. over the last several years, you've had a number of elected officials, both at the city and the county level, who've been pushing for these kinds of changes. And you've had outside organizations like Trees Durham and others who've been pushing outside the organization for these changes. And what we see in this agenda item and the following agenda item is the fruit of those efforts. And it's the kind of work that Durham has done very well over the generation on a whole host of issues, and I'm glad to see it here. I just wanted to say one word about invasive species, Mr. Mayor. Earlier today, I learned a valuable lesson about the power of invasive species and how unfortunate they can be. Our home lost power at about 5:30 in the morning, which has all sorts of problems when your children are supposed to go to school online. And the power company later told me that the technician came to our home and learned that an invasive species of ivy had made its way up the utility pole and worked its way into the equipment at the top of the pole over a period of many months. And this morning at 5:30, it finally did enough damage to turn off the power at my house. I don't know what I did to upset this particular brand of ivy, this particular breed, but suffice to say, I learned a valuable lesson about how unwelcome these invasive species can be, and looking forward to supporting the measure so hopefully their families don't set off their alarms at 5:30 in the morning and wake up their kids like mine did. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for sharing that story, council member, that illustrative story. Any other stories, any other comments, colleagues? Councilmember Freeman.
Thank you. I just wanted to also thank everyone for working on this and acknowledging that it's very detailed and extensive, and acknowledging that there are so many different species that should be here and those that should not. And I really wanted to welcome so many voices or to the conversation or to the council meeting this evening, acknowledging I haven't seen many of these faces in so long. It feels like, the opportunity to speak to them and say, hello, and how are you? And then also to say, I would love to catch up with you all. And then I just wanted to note that I'm grateful to the leadership of Chris and, I'm sorry, not Chris, to Ricky and to Katie, and acknowledging that these invasive species are here. I would love to hear about what your plans sound like around addressing the existing invasiveness in communities like my own, where folks might not be able to afford to remove it. And so it doesn't quite fit into this conversation, but I'm going to squeeze it in on the tail end because I'm not at those JCCPC meetings, and just note that I appreciate the work. Thank you.
Thank you,
Councilmember Freeman. We are here for you. Anytime you want to come, you are more than welcome.
They are crazy exciting, let me tell you.
I'm dropping. So, Councilmember Middleton, I do like hearing about all of those pieces and parts. So it is.
Since I'll be dropping
I
off his chair, the meetings will be a lot better going forward. So.
I don't know if you all have noticed, but in my 9-something years on this council, for some reason, I've never found myself on JCCPC. I know it's important work, and I'm glad someone else is there to do it. Okay. So I notice a comment, Councilmember Freeman, from Ricky White in the chat. You might want to check out with Ricky. All right, colleagues. I'll just add my congratulations and to the detailed work, the consultation with the landscapers, as well as members of the public interested in native plants. I think a lot of us met with the Audubon Society and others about this, and it's great to see this come to fruition. I really like the principles of eco-friendly landscaping. I thought they were great. And I do want to note that the formerly ubiquitous landscaping cliche, the Bradford pear, is now relegated to the not allowed list. I will just remember many years ago when the city of Durham planted along Carolina Avenue, when I first moved here, a lot of Bradford pears, very pretty in the spring during ACC tournament week, but not very long lasting. And it's just interesting to think about how over time, and by the way, those trees were planted by a city employee one Ed Harrison. You all know, former city council member from Chapel Hill. But times have changed, and the Bradford Pear has found its rightful place among the not to be allowed. All right, council members, any other comments? If not, we can go ahead and close this public hearing. And I will ask for the one motion that we need, which is to approve the proposed revisions to the landscape manual for Durham.
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Reese, seconded by Councilmember Caballero. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Schul,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Caballero, Councilmember Freeline,
Aye.
Councilmember Freeman,
Aye.
Councilmember Middleton,
I vote aye.
Councilmember Reese,
Aye.
Councilmember Caballero, did you want to vote?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank
Got it.
I think it cut out. I apologize.
Yeah, we couldn't hear you for a minute.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The ayes have it, and the motion passes 7-0. We're now at item 23, but I do want to call attention to the fact that there's only one item between us and my favorite item of the year, item 24, which is the Unified Development Ordinance Text Amendment, Omnibus Changes 15, also known as Mike Stock. And but we'll get through item 23 and on our way to item 24. All right, Unified Development Ordinance Text Amendment, Trees and Landscaping, TC 20001. And we will hear our report from staff.
Thank you very much, Mayor and council members. Michael Stock with the Planning Department, and I'll try to move fast for this so we can get to the early Hanukkah present for the mayor. Also, before I begin, staff would like to note that all the required notifications have been performed for the Planning Department public hearing items and are on file for review. In regards to TC 20001, that text amendment proposes revisions to various provisions of the Unified Development Ordinance regarding tree coverage, landscaping, and street trees. Based upon work with Trees Durham, the amendments allow street trees in the right-of-way for new streets. This new requirement also coincides with the review and update of the Durham Landscape Manual, as you've just acted upon. Additional amendments are proposed, including an update to the tree coverage requirements for non-residential development, and that was an item that was expressly requested by City Council from a past text amendment action. Also, an update to required mix of tree species and other technical updates or corrections. The Planning Commission recommended approval of this item, and the Board of Commissioners had already considered this amendment at its November 23rd meeting and approved it 5-0. As a reminder, two actions are requested, first on the statement of consistency and then on the ordinance for adoption itself. Thank you, and be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stock. Colleagues, you've heard the report from staff, and I'm now going to declare this public hearing open. And first, I'm going to ask if there are any comments or questions for staff by members of the council. All right, seeing none, we'll move to our speakers. There are 3 people signed up to speak on this item. Susan Schneider, Joanne Napoli, and Emmanuel Brown. And I'm going to ask the 3 of them to speak, and each of them can have 3 minutes. If there's anyone else that would like to speak on this item, please raise your virtual hand or make yourself known in the chat, and we're happy to have you speak as well. All right, we're going to begin now with Ms. Schneider. Ms. Schneider, are you available to be heard?
Mr. Mayor, Ms. Schneider is not in the queue.
Okay, thank you very much. Then we will hear from Joanne Napoli. Is Ms. Napoli here?
I don't see her either.
All right. And then we will hear from Emmanuel Brown. Is Mr. Brown here? I don't see him either. Okay.
Moment ago.
I think sometimes people sign up when they think they're just making a comment, but that's okay. And then, so I do see 2 people sign up to who've raised their virtual hand, Katie Rose Levin and Ricky White. Let me just see if there's anyone else in the group. And we'll begin with Ms. Levin. Ms. Levin, welcome, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to, one, say thank you to the staff, particularly Mike Stock, who's been on this odyssey with us for about 4 years. These all originated from a report that came out from Duke University that showed that communities of color in Durham have no trees, while predominantly white and wealthy communities do. This is a system of environmental racism and structural racism that was established during the redlining practices in the 1930s. And it matters because having tree cover doesn't cure ills, but it sure does make them better. It reduces asthma, heart attacks. It does reduce crime. Even in Chicago, when they tracked where individual shootings were, they were less likely to happen where there was tree cover. It increases math scores, reduces ADD, ADHD. A new report just came out that it helps students in transition to schools, which I think is particularly important during Corona. And during the pandemic, access to outdoors should be for everyone. And sometimes people just can walk out their door and that's where their access is. So restoring the equity of access to environment is really important. And we see that with all of our communities, whether it's Bragtown, Walltown, and Merrick-Moore, or Trinity Park, Old West Durham, and Forest Hills requesting enduring developments, not just for affordable housing, which is critical, but also for environmental protections as well. So these changes have taken over 4 years. They're database, they're collaborative, and they really are taking Durham a step closer to addressing environmental justice. Environmental justice in the United States was actually started by poor Black folks in North Carolina. And I'm really excited that Durham is taking the step forward to try to create equity, to try to address climate change through forest preservation, to require street trees be planted next to street where they were forbidden from before, and in generally to look towards the future of where we need the environment literally to protect our lives, and that it should be accessible to everyone. So a big thanks to, like Charlie was saying, the internal advocacy from elected officials, government agencies, and staff such as Mike, and then also to all of our advocates on the phone and who've written from all parts of Durham to help make this happen. So I really appreciate y'all voting on this, putting this together. This is a really big step forward, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Levin. We appreciate you. Second will be Ricky White. Mr. White, welcome, and you also have 3 minutes.
Great, thank you all. Again, Katie Rose does so much better than I could do at explaining this. I just second everything that she said. Super supportive of this work. I want to just point out that she has put a ton of energy into this effort along with staff. And I just want to thank her for all of her work on this and ask that y'all support this really important change, which maybe seems small, but is really going to help us change the face of the city and help us with climate change issues going forward.
Thank you so much, Mr. White. Is there anyone else who would like to be heard on this item? This is a public hearing item. I don't see any other virtual hands raised. All right. Colleagues, I'm going to now declare this public hearing closed and bring the matter back before the council for any questions or comments you may have, and then we'll vote on this. Any comments or questions, colleagues? Madam Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am also really excited about this item and wanted to thank the staff and the community members who've worked on it as well. I remember reading that paper from Duke about the lack of trees in communities of color in Durham and being really interested in fixing that problem and learning how big of a problem that was. So I'm glad we're taking this step. But I also wanted to bring up a couple of trade-offs that I see us making just so that we're clear about them. The first is that, there were some comments about the saving of land for street trees, actually meaning there's less land to build housing. And so we're making a conscious decision to reserve some of that land knowing that it might make it harder to build housing, that building fewer housing units might make the housing units that are available in whatever development is being considered less affordable. And so I just wanted to point that out. We have a strong affordable housing program here in the city, and we're investing millions of dollars and have invested millions of dollars over the last few years in affordable housing. I feel like this is a reasonable trade-off to make, but I just wanted to make it clear that it's there. The other thing that I wanted to comment on is that in the context of a consumer market for housing, anything that you do to make housing more desirable raises the price of that housing. And so we are, I'm also concerned with the impacts on prices in areas where we might choose to add green infrastructure like street trees, like bike lanes, like trails. And we've had this conversation specifically around the Beltline Trail and other trail projects that, that there's a concern that neighborhoods that have been disinvested in for a long time, that certainly deserve more investment, that when they receive that investment, it can sometimes act as a factor in displacement. And so I just want to, I plan on voting for the item. I support this, but I think that these are things that we need to take into consideration as we continue to think about planning and growth and development in the city, and continue to invest in affordability and in providing more affordable housing to mitigate any negative impacts of these kinds of policies on our residents. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. Councilmember Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I want to appreciate Madam Mayor Pro Tem for highlighting those facts and just acknowledge just a tagline of just realizing like this is why our shared prosperity conversation needs to match our affordable housing conversation, acknowledging that the cost is not going down, and we want to make sure that folks have access to the capital and to the resources so that they will be able to afford their future here in Durham. And so I look forward to continuing to work towards the shared prosperity that will increase incomes for folks who will need to stay in this city. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Council Member. Are there any other comments or questions for staff? I'll just add a few comments. One of them, which is already mentioned, that like most good things that we do, this is a trade-off. This is not without cost. In addition to the discussion that we just had, the things that Madam Mayor Pro Tem pointed out, we also know that there's cost to the city in terms of maintenance, and I appreciate the specificity with which staff has laid out the cost each year for the appropriate city review, inspection, and long-term maintenance and care of the trees in the right-of-way, which will be a city responsibility. But in my mind, this is clearly worth the cost. I think it was maybe 6 years ago that several of us, and I want to shout out Cabot French, who's not speaking tonight, but was really, several of us sat down. She was really our early leader. We would meet at her house on her back porch to regularly meet, to begin to figure out how to sustain Durham's tree canopy and to make it more equitably distributed. The map's already been mentioned, the incredible correspondence between the neighborhoods that were redlined and the neighborhoods that have no tree canopy or little tree canopy. And we wanted to change that. Maybe a year later, we were joined by Katie Rose Levin, who's spoken here tonight, and we formed Trees Durham. And Katie Rose has been just a remarkable and persistent leader. I really, really want to, Katie Rose, say to you that we would not have done all the things we've done on trees the last few years in Durham without your leadership, and I want to appreciate that. And I also want to talk about another terrific leader that we have in the city, Tanya Dautlick of Keep Durham Beautiful, who's been a partner to Trees Durham in all this work. We had a few clear goals at the time, and I think tonight marks the culmination of one of the most significant goals we laid out, the requirement for street trees in the right-of-way and new developments. It's taken a long time to get here, but thanks to the good work of our staff, and I want to also include our public works staff, because As we know, a lot of the complications regarding trees in the right-of-way are things that the public works staff has to deal with. But a lot of the things that these complications have been ironed out, and I think we have this very good amendment in front of us. And this follows our earlier passage of other improvements in our trees ordinances within the last year that Mr. Stock pointed out. At the same time, over the last 3 or 4 years, we've doubled the number of trees we're planting from about 750 a year to about 1,500 per year. And this is a great increase. Many thanks to the General Services Department, Keep Durham Beautiful, Trees Durham for this work. Just this past weekend, I was out with Keep Durham Beautiful and Trees Durham in a local church. We planted 17 fruit trees in Red Maple Park. Beautiful, going to be beautiful fig and pecan trees. And that is it's really been great to be involved in that. Our tree planting has been done through a racial equity lens, and I'm really proud of that, the way the city has been consciously planting trees in previously underserved neighborhoods. I do still believe that we need to get from the 1,500 a year to 3,000 a year. This can't all be city money. It's got to be, as it is in many other cities, private money as well. We know, for example, in Charlotte, where they're planting many more trees than us, that private businesses have stepped up to help with that. But we've still got a way to go. And I continue to believe that we are going to be able to hit that goal. But what we're doing tonight, I think we really need to celebrate as a milestone accomplishment. These things sometimes take time. This is one of them. It has to go through JCCPC after all. And it's just great that we're here tonight. All right, colleagues, any other comments? Any further comments? Okay, then I'm going to ask, we need 2 motions. The first will be to adopt the appropriate consistency statement as required for NCGS 160A-383.
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Seconded.
Moved by Councilmember Reese, seconded by Councilmember Freelon. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Schewel.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Caballero.
Aye.
Councilmember Freelon.
Aye.
Councilmember Freeman.
Aye.
Councilmember Middleton.
I vote aye.
Councilmember Reese.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The ayes have it, and the motion passes 7-0. Colleagues, our city attorney has asked me to read more of these motions than I usually do, so I'm going to do that. Motion 2 to adopt an ordinance amending the UDO, incorporating revisions to Article 8, Environmental Protection, Article 9, Landscaping and Buffering, Article 12, Infrastructure and Public Improvements, and Article 16, Design Districts. Is there a motion to approve that?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Middleton, seconded by Councilmember Reese. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Schewel.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Caballero.
Aye.
Councilmember Freelon.
Aye.
Councilmember Freeman.
Aye.
Councilmember Middleton.
I vote aye.
Councilmember Reese.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The ayes have it, and the motion passes unanimously. All right, colleagues, we'll now move to the moment we've all been waiting for. Item 24, Unified Development Ordinance Text Amendment, Omnibus Changes 15, TC2 00002, also known as Mike Stock. I forgot my tie-dye, but I'll do it for Omnibus. I'll do it for Omnibus Changes 16, I promise. Okay, Councilmember Reese is celebrating appropriately. Mr. Stock, welcome. We'll now hear the report from staff.
Thank you very much. Michael Stock again with the Planning Department. The text amendment TC2 proposes technical revisions and minor policy changes to various provisions of the Unified Development Ordinance. The amendments are identified as necessary corrections, clarifications, or reorganizations, or other minor changes to clarify the intent of the regulations or codify interpretations of regulations, or to reflect minor policy changes, some of which are not solely technical in nature. Highlights include revisions to the RC district, remove core and support references, TSUP applicability to schools and and to within the county, updates to riparian buffer requirements, additional SRP standards for sites with emergency services, and clarification to boundary buffer standards. In regards to the comments regarding the changes to the text for National Register eligibility with development plans, staff has provided a response memo that's in the packet. I believe City Manager Page had mentioned that at the head of the meeting. That was in response to Commissioner Miller's concerns about that. And Commissioner Miller was provided a follow-up regarding that memo. Planning Commission did recommend approval, and the Board of Commissioners considered this amendment at its November 23rd meeting and also approved it 5-0. Again, there are 2 actions requested. First, on the statement of consistency, and then the ordinance for adoption. Again, thank you, and I'll be happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Mr. Stock. Colleagues, you have now heard the report from staff, and I'm going to declare this public hearing open. And first, I'm going to ask if there are any questions for staff by members of the council. Mr. Stock, I have a question. When the omnibus, the 16th omnibus package, which you mentioned in the memo to Mr. Miller, or regarding Mr. Miller's concerns, when will that be coming to us approximately?
We're actually wrapping up that internally this month. I've already had staff meetings on it to kind of start going over that list. And we should be getting it to JCCPC at their next meeting in February. So Planning Commission should see it in March or April, and then you should hopefully get it, depending upon how the scheduling works, sometime either spring or summer. So not too far off as things would have it.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
And in that omnibus, you are planning to address, can you talk about the concerns can you reiterate the concerns of Planning Commissioner Tom Miller and the way in which you're seeking to address those?
Sure. There were 2 concerns raised. One was that he felt that the changes we were making to the existing conditions list regarding recognizing National Register sites or those eligible for National Register was limiting or reducing the extent to which historic sites are recognized. And he pointed out that there were different maps that the State Historic Preservation Office maintains. We reviewed that, and it's all about how things are listed or referenced, and we do reference the additional Durham architecture inventory and the Durham archaeological inventory in that same list. And those are the same information that has been given to the state and reflected on their maps. So we believe we cover that concern, and that we will look in the next omnibus to see if we can make that list of existing conditions a little, to clarify that list of conditions and to incorporate those references a little more clearly. The second was to his acknowledgement of other lists that other historic stakeholder organizations put out. He referenced the 2013 Preservation Durham list. And we recognize that those are important lists too. And so we're committed to him and to the Planning Commission and to you folks that we will also add language to that list in the next omnibus to address those organizations and those lists that may be put out for that. And there are other organizations too, Open Durham, and there might be other lists, not just the list that was referenced in his memo. So we want to kind of take a look at that and make the language more all-encompassing.
Thank you, Mr. Stock. I appreciate that. And that'll be approximately the spring then.
I'm sorry, spring or summer of next year, yes.
Spring or summer. Okay, great. Thank you very much. And thank you for addressing those. I think those were very important. I appreciate Mr. Miller raising those. And I'm glad you're addressing them. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, colleagues, any other questions or comments for staff at this time before we ask if there are any speakers to this item? All right, then I don't see anyone signed up to speak. If you were present and you would like to speak on this item, could you please either raise your virtual hand or make yourself known in the chat? I see Mr. Tom Miller. If there's anyone else who would like to make themselves heard tonight on this item, please either raise your virtual hand or let us know in the chat. Okay. Madam Clerk, please make Mr. Tom Miller available to be heard. And Mr. Miller, welcome, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, members of the council. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you tonight. I am speaking on behalf of Preservation Durham, the Historic Preservation Society of Durham, and not in my capacity as a planning commission member. I'm sorry to approach you with so many hats on. With regard to the changes that Mike just discussed, we are extremely grateful to the City Council for your consideration of our concerns. We look forward to the next omnibus change to the UDO because it will include the 2013 African American Historic Sites Inventory. We think this is really important, and I think it addresses the public history component of the Racial Equity Task Force report, which we are very committed to at Preservation Durham. With regard to the more technical change that I discussed, the UDO today essentially requires properties that are listed in the National Register are eligible to be listed. The proposed change to the UDO would be properties that are listed or properties that are study listed, but drops the properties that are eligible to be listed. Now, Mike points out that a great many of the properties which are currently on the SHPO maps as eligible to be included come from the Durham inventory. This is true. The inventory was created, almost 40 years ago and hasn't been updated since. But that's not the only way properties achieve what's called a determination of eligibility by the State Historic Preservation Office and get on that map. As a matter of fact, a great many properties have been added to the map. And I'm referring to properties, usually this happens when the DOT does a widening project like the one on Highway 55 through East Durham or on Highway 54 through Southern Durham. They hire historic preservation consultants, and those consultants submit reports. And from those reports, properties are sent to the SHPO for inclusion for a determination of eligibility. Those properties are on the maps today, but are not included in the items 8 and 9 in the current list. I also point out that there are properties in the Research Triangle Park which enjoy a determination of eligibility, which are not included in 8 or 9. So the Durham inventory and the county inventory are not the only way that determinations of eligibility are made and get onto the maps. So we still hope that the resulting ordinance will contemplate properties that are listed, properties that are study listed, and properties that enjoy a determination of eligibility. All three appear on the same maps that are published by the SHPO for Durham. So that's our request to you, is to include all three of those. And we also look forward to including our 2013 African American Historic Sites Inventory, so important for Durham in how we deal with and shape our own perception of our public history. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. I'm available for questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Miller. Mr. Stock, you've already spoken to the item, but let me just ask another clarifying question, if I may. You've already spoken to the fact that the 2013 African American History List will be taken up in the 16th Omnibus. Can you speak again to, and I know you addressed it originally, but could you speak again to address the second point that Mr. Miller has addressed regarding the list, the eligibility list and so forth?
I'm actually going to, probably much to Sarah's chagrin, defer to Sarah Young. She has a little bit more background knowledge on the historic preservation side of things.
No problem. Thank you. Welcome, Ms. Young.
Good evening, Mayor and members of Council. Sarah Young with the Planning Department. To address the concern, I actually was just chatting behind the scenes with another member of staff who worked for SHPO for many years, and she was able to clarify for us that SHPO has a study list, and then they have what is called determined eligible through environmental review, and this is what Commissioner Miller was talking about. So these are reviews that are commonly called, you may have heard the terminology, Section 106 review. And those reviews actually come, SHPO sends those folks to us. We on staff, Carla Rosenberg of our staff, reviews those, so we are aware of those. That is something that we could look to codify in the next round of Omnibus. In general, I think that broadening the reference to consulting with the mapped resources that SHPO has, I think would be something relatively easy to do that might be more all-encompassing. So the intent was not to eliminate anything. The intent was to come into closer conformity with the terminology that SHPO uses. So we can certainly look at that terminology again next round.
Thank you very much, Ms. Young. Colleagues, any questions or comments at this point? Councilmember Freeman.
Thank you. I just really wanted to just highlight the glaring miss that might have happened had Preservation Durham stepped in to say, because I know that I was not paying as close attention as I probably normally would have, but I appreciate Tom Miller pointing those points out about the African-American historic sites, and also just noting that it's not just the African-American, but it's the middle class or working poor community of white folks as well, that the history gets lost when we're not paying attention, acknowledging that that's where the development over the last 10 years has kind of like decimated some of the older houses, and just noting that this kind of lack of, I guess, value in the history of those who are African-American or middle class or working poor isn't as, as much of a factor in, I guess, planning and zoning as it could be. And so I'm not sure how to address it, but I would like to have more conversation with our planning director around what it looks like to make sure that this isn't something that's left to individual residents in the community to come up with, because I mean, Tom Miller's expertise in real estate and development is quite unique in our community. And without, our staff paying attention to stuff like this, I'm concerned. So just noting to raise that.
Thank you, Council Member.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions, colleagues? Councilmember Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As a member of the JCCPC, I've had an opportunity to vet all of the kind of the wonky technical aspects of the amendment. So I'll just use this moment for celebration and commendation. Just want to thank the staff, Sarah and Mike, tremendously for the work that's been done on this. I am also excited about taking up the 2013 African American listing in the next omnibus consideration. I also, while I have the opportunity, I want to thank Commissioner Miller, particularly for his work with the Friends of Gear Cemetery and the work. And there's a lot of people involved in the work, but I know Commissioner Miller is involved in that work, and I just want to thank him and the rest of that team. The sacred only remains sacred if you treat it like it's sacred. And so the work that they've done is an important honoring and recovery and restoration of a very, very vital part of our history for so many people in our city. So I thank him for that work. And I look forward for closing out Mike Stock with a vote. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry, colleagues. I got lost in something there. Got lost in my technology for a minute. Thank you, Councilmember And I really want to second what you said about Mike Stock's work on these things. They're legendary. All right. Any other questions or comments? Any other questions or comments? Okay. If not, then we have, I'm going to declare this, I believe I've already declared the public hearing closed, but if I haven't, I will. And we'll now move to the first motion to adopt the appropriate consistency statement.
So
Move to
moved.
adopt consistency.
Moved by Councilmember Freeman, seconded by Councilmember Middleton. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Schewel,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Caballero,
Aye.
Councilmember Freelon,
Aye.
Councilmember Freeman,
Aye.
Councilmember Middleton,
I vote aye.
Councilmember Reese.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. The second motion that we need is to adopt an ordinance amending the UDO incorporated revisions. I'll shorten this a little to Article 3, Article 4, Article 5, Article 6, Article 8, Article 9, and Article 12.
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Move to read.
Moved by Councilmember Freeman, seconded by Councilmember Middleton. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Schewel,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Caballero,
Aye.
Councilmember Freelon, Councilmember Freeman,
Aye.
Councilmember Middleton,
I vote aye.
Councilmember Reese,
Aye.
and Councilmember Freelon.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The ayes have it. The motion passes 7-0. I want to thank Tom Miller for being here and helping us with these. And I want to thank the staff for their response to Mr. Miller. And we look forward to some of those changes in Omnibus 16. Again, I want to thank you, Mike Stock, for the work that you do every year on these Omnibus changes. I know they're difficult, and we appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, colleagues. Now we'll move to item 25, Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security, the CARES Act. Public hearing on an approval of First Amendment to the FY 2021 Annual Action Plan and 2025 Consolidated Plan. And we will hear from staff, and I see Mr. Johnson is with us.
Good afternoon, good evening, Mayor and the Mayor Pro Tem and members of Council. Reginald Johnson, Director of the Department of Community Development. This item is actually the first amendment to our 21 Annual Action Plan and the 2020-2025 Consolidated Plan. And I do want to ask, before I turn it over to Ms. Wilma Conyers, to share that on this particular item, in order to comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act and the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development's requirements for providing accommodations, communication access will be provided for the duration of this public hearing. And we just ask that everyone please speak at a normal speaking pace. Ms. Monica McGee is our sign language interpreter, and so she's on the screen as we speak. And with that, I will turn this over to Ms. Conyers of Community Development staff to read the particulars before we begin the public hearing. Ms. Conyers.
Ms. Conyers, are you with us? I don't see her, Mr. Johnson.
Okay.
But I bet you can carry the ball.
Yes, sir, I can. Hold on just a moment.
All right.
Mr. Mayor, you asked us to remind you about the captioning breaks, and we've got one in about 15 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. I appreciate the reminder.
Okay. The purpose, and I'll begin, Mr. Mayor, if you don't mind.
Sure. I see Ms. Conyers is now connecting, Mr. Johnson. If you want to turn it over to her, do you want to do that?
Yes, I would like to turn it over to her.
Okay. Ms. Conyers, are you with us?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Welcome. We're glad to have you.
All right, I had a slight technical difficulty. Okay.
Understood.
So you won't be able to, I won't have access to video, but I have audio. Good evening, Mayor Schewel and members of City Council. I am Wilmer Conyers, Planning and Performance Administrator. The purpose of this public hearing is to receive citizen comments on the proposed amendment to the FY 2020-2021 Annual Action Plan and the 2020-2025 Consolidated Plan for Coronavirus Aid Relief and Economic Security, known as CARES Act funding. The CARES Act, Public Law 116-136, was signed into law on March 27, 2020, to provide additional funding for communities in their efforts to prevent, prepare, and respond to the coronavirus pandemic known as COVID-19. The City of Durham expects to receive $2,716,217 in Community Development Block Grant, referred to as CDBG CV, $2,662,668 in Emergency Solutions Grant, referred to as ESG CV, and $70,340 in Housing Opportunities for Persons with AIDS, known as HOPWA CV, funding which totals $5,449,225. The additional supplemental funding through the CARES Act requires an amendment to the FY 2020-2021 Annual Action Plan / 2020-2025 Consolidated Plan. This first proposed amendment addresses a total of $1,875,324 and outlines the current and proposed uses of these funds. The remaining balance of the remaining balance of $3,573,901, which consists of $1,513,616 in CDBG CV funds and $2,060,285 in ESG CV funding will be addressed in a second amendment at a later date. The proposed amendment was made available for public review from October 21st, 2020 through November 20th, 2020 on the Community Development's website and was also distributed via general listserv. The Citizen Participation Plan contained in the adopted 2020-2025 Consolidated Plan requires that a public hearing be conducted for formal amendments that add, delete, or substantially change the Consolidated Plan or the Annual Action Plan. Notice of this meeting was properly advertised in both the Herald Sun and the Kapasa newspapers on November 25th, 2020, posted on the Community Development's website, and was also distributed via a general listserv. Comments from this public hearing and a summary of written comments received from citizens concerning the proposed amendment will be included in the final document. No comments were received during the comment period. In closing, after this public hearing has closed, we ask that City Council vote to approve the draft first substantial amendment to the FY 2020-2021 Annual Action Plan / 2020-2025 Consolidated Plan for submission to HUD. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Conyers. We appreciate your work on this. Colleagues, you've now heard the report from staff. I'm going to declare this public hearing open, and I'm going to first ask if there are any questions for staff by members of the council. Ms. Conyers, I do have a couple of questions. When is the second amendment that you refer to? When is that next amendment? Approximately, are we going to hear that?
I am going to defer to Mr. Johnson.
Okay.
I would say, Mr. Mayor, it would be sometime in the spring of the year. We don't know exactly. Of course, it depends upon some details we have to work through. If you recall, a good portion of the money that we have here was contracts that you all approved in the summer. And what we're doing now, we use our local dollars, dedicated housing fund, because the HUD allowed us to do that for COVID funds. And this will, public hearing will and approval will allow us to get reimbursed for those funds.
Got you. So unlike some of the other CARES Act funding, this money doesn't all have to be spent by December 31st. We've got a whole second part of this money that will be spent at a later time.
That's correct. So this money comes from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. We have a different set of rules when they say CARES funding than when it's popularly talked about CARES funding. It's a different set of pot of funds.
Gotcha. Thank you for that clarification. All right, colleagues, any other questions for staff at this time? Councilmember Freeman.
Just a question regarding, so noting that these are reimbursed funds, as we go forward, I don't know if there's a tracking mechanism or not, or if that's something you're doing manually, but just noting that if there's any way to tell between how much is going towards public fund or public housing versus private housing, that's like beyond Section 8 or someone with a voucher, and just being able to track that internally. I just wanted to.
Okay, Councilmember, we'll have to look at that. That's actually a more appropriate question for DSS, Department of Social Services, because the large part, if you remember, of these funds, we actually are administered by the Department of Social Services for emergency rental assistance.
Thank you.
So we'll follow up with them, but I don't know. I would have to find out for them what level of detail they have in terms of person's housing.
And then I guess along those same lines, if it's possible to make sure that we're also including, I know with the HOPA funds and specific like dollars, there's a lot of demographic information that's included, but just noting that in addition to like race, gender, income, just being able to make sure that we're addressing the folks at the margins the most. I just want to be able to track back to that. So thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilmember. Colleagues, any other comments or questions? Councilmember Caballero.
Just wanted to appreciate Councilmember Freeman's questions. It was something I had. I remember the conversations, a lot of this money we dedicated to rental assistance over the summer, and just I would like to see how that money has been spent and where it has gone. So when staff can get that from DSS, that would be great.
Thank you very much, Councilmember. Any other questions or comments, colleagues? Is there anyone here who would like to speak on this item? If so, please raise your virtual hand or make yourself heard in the chat. All right, then I don't see anyone. I'm going to declare this public hearing closed and the matter is back before the council. We will need 3 motions to approve this. Motion 1, we to approve the draft First Amendment to the 2021 Annual Action Plan and 2025 Consolidated Plan for submission to the U.S. Department of HUD. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Freeman, seconded, I believe, by Councilmember Middleton. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Stuhl,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Caballero,
Aye.
Councilmember Freelon,
Aye.
Councilmember Freeman,
Aye.
Councilmember Middleton,
I vote aye.
and Councilmember Reese.
Aye.
Thank you.
The second motion is to authorize the city manager to execute all administrative requirements and contractual documents for the implementation of the amended annual action plan where activities are currently underway and being proposed with this CARES Act funding. Madam, is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Freeman, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Johnson. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Stuhl,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Caballero,
Aye.
Councilmember Freelon, Councilmember Freeman,
Aye.
Councilmember Middleton,
I vote aye.
Councilmember Reese.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The ayes have it, and the motion passes 7-0. The third motion is to adopt the City of Durham, U.S. Department of HUD and Urban HUD Community Development Block Grant Coronavirus Project Ordinance, the amount of $2,716,217.
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Moved by Councilmember Freeman,
Seconded.
seconded by Councilmember Freelon. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Stuhl,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Caballero,
Aye.
Councilmember Freelon,
Aye.
Councilmember Freeman,
Aye.
Councilmember Middleton,
I vote aye.
Councilmember Reese.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you, Madam Clerk. The ayes have it, and the motion passes 7-0. The fourth motion will be to adopt the City of Durham, U.S. Department of HUD Emergency Solutions Grant Project Ordinance, the amount of $2,662,668. Can I have a motion? Moved by Councilmember Freeman, seconded by Councilmember Freelon. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Stuhl,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Caballero,
Aye.
Councilmember Freelon,
Aye.
Councilmember Freeman,
Aye.
Councilmember Middleton,
I vote aye.
Councilmember Reese.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The motion passes 7-0. And finally, motion 5 to adopt the City of Durham, U.S. Department of HUD Housing Opportunities for Persons with AIDS Coronavirus Grant Project Ordinance, the amount of $70,340.
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Seconded.
Moved by Councilmember Freeman. Is there a second?
Seconded.
Seconded by Councilmember Freelon. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Stuhl,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Caballero,
Aye.
Councilmember Freelon,
Aye.
Councilmember Freeman,
Aye.
Councilmember Middleton,
I vote aye.
Councilmember Reese.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Johnson and Ms. Conyers, for bringing us this item. Very
Thank you,
important
Mr.
work.
Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Colleagues, we will not have to give a rest to our closed captioners, but we appreciate them. And I want to appreciate you, colleagues, for a good night at the Durham City Council and our staff. There being no further business to come before this body, I will declare this meeting adjourned at 8:57 p.m. Good night, everybody.
Night, everybody.
Night. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, staff.